Hello and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres, and the Good Girl Confessional podcast is proudly brought to us by WB40, Women Beyond 40, for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond who want to talk about grown-up stuff. You can check us out at WB40.com. Before we begin today's podcast, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we record this podcast. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Today in the podcast, I am very excited to introduce you to an extraordinary woman. Her name is Nicole Webb. Nicole is a journalist, a book publicist, an author publicist, and she's been a newsreader. She is quite an extraordinary human being. She is also the author of her book, China Blonde, which explores her time living in China and all the adventures that she went through. It's a fantastic book. She is just an absolute delight. She is a woman who seeks adventure and always seems to find it. Please welcome her to the podcast, Nicole Webb.
Hey there. When Sandy's not interviewing kick-ass women, she's hanging out with me at Alex the Seal, a podcast about music and nostalgia. I'm Jo Pybus, and each episode, Sandy and I talk about all the songs that got us hooked up, knocked up, and broken up. Do yourself a favour and search Alex the Seal on your podcast app. Love you, Molly.
Hello, Nicole. How are you? Welcome to the confessional.
Oh, Sandy, I am so glad to be here at last. It has been a bit of a runaround to get here, but we made it, and I'm very excited to talk to you.
Yeah, look, I'm super excited to have you here. And, wow, your life has been crazy hectic and very, very busy. So I'm very grateful you got to get to jump in and join us today.
Me too. Thank you.
So we should tell everyone what is going on in your life because it's so busy. There's so much. First of all, let's start with you've had to move house more than once.
Not once, but 3 times this year.
Wow.
So this is very boring and I won't go on about it, but our house in inner city Sydney flooded in March with all those massive floods. It wasn't a major flood, but we were in the UK, and when we came back a few weeks later, mold just started sprouting, and not just any mold. We lifted a big mirror and it was black, thick, huge mold that was just get out of the house now sort of thing. And I've got a bit of an autoimmune issue. So we went and we thought we were going to have a staycation. We went to the Sheraton Hotel and we thought, just a few days. 14 weeks later, we were still there. And thank goodness we were able to be there. But, it was there, and then we had to get out and get into an Airbnb. So we went to one, and then that kind of ran out after 2 months. It was booked out, and now we're in another one. So here we are, and it's been a bit of a, crazy ride. I really feel for people that are in much more serious situations than us.
Yeah, it's just been really extraordinary, hasn't it? Just watching all of this unfold sort of right across Australia and thinking, wow. You're right, so many people affected. But I'm glad that you guys got out and that, you, as you say, luckily you were able to find other accommodation because it's a long drawn out process. And I think there's insurers are like kind of, so behind the 8 ball because there's so many people and, whatever the thing may be, but it must be so frustrating.
I think they said they had... Normally, they might have 3,000 cases at a time. And when we first spoke to them, 70,000 cases. So, they're up against it. And, so to stand out and get any attention is tough. So
wow.
You jump up and down a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? But crazy. But the nice part about what's going on in your world is that you have this extraordinary career. I think you're absolutely bloody fabulous.
Thank you. I'm not sure I agree, but thanks.
No, you are. You're amazing. So tell everybody who doesn't know who Nicole Webb is, everybody should, tell us what it is that you do.
What do I do? Well, Well, I'm in media. I guess I'm a journalist by trade. And I always say that first and foremost, because I guess that's what I think I am. I'm a journalist. I started out when I was 25 and did that for a very long time. And that led me to Sky News, where I became a news presenter, which I did for about 10 years. And then we moved overseas and we came back about 6 years ago. And I've sort of just been doing all sorts of things media related, from media training to, which is, training corporates how to, be on camera and get interviews with the media, to some MC work along the way, blogging when I was an expat, writing a lot of articles. And then I published my book in 2020 in COVID, which was about our life in China. And off the back of that, of course, I did my own publicity because I know a lot of journalists. I know the media landscape. I know what they're looking for. And then after that, this kind of wave of other authors wanting my help came about. And that sort of side gig has turned into like a full-time hustle. And I love it. It's kind of like a job I never thought about, and it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's like perfect for me. So, yeah.
How
and I'm
fantastic.
sending them all your way.
You are. And so we should, I wanted to point that out as well, that you have always been so incredibly generous in terms of introducing me to some amazing women who have written books and have had such adventures in their life, a number of whom, of course, have been on this podcast.
Yes.
And I love that because it feeds into exactly, we're both on the same page, that women have extraordinary stories to tell.
They do.
And, you just want people to know those stories and know that those books are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. There's just so many incredible women, as you say, doing so many different things. It's just awe-inspiring. So, yeah, I love it when I get one that I know is going to be right up your alley.
Well, we do love a good story here in the confessional,
yes,
that's for sure.
We do.
For sure. And I love that a lot of the women that you have introduced me to, they've written books, and generally it's a memoir or it's a, instructional kind of thing. But really, they love to come in and actually tell me all their like little confessions in here as well, which is brilliant. Now, we always say
and
confessions.
You're great at getting those out of them. Before you know it, they're off on this tangent about, did you know?
I know, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
It's so great. We love it. We always say that, confessions are always welcome, but they're certainly not compulsory.
Yeah, I love it.
So, speaking about books, hello, look at this beautiful, for those who are watching along.
Wow.
I am holding up Nicole's beautiful book. It is called China Blonde. And it's how a newsreader's search for adventure led to friendship, acceptance, and peroxide pandemonium in China. I love that. I love the tagline.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely beautiful looking book, but absolutely beautifully written.
Not with me, not counting me on the front, which I didn't anticipate, but it is a beautiful cover, the design and everything. Yeah.
It is, but more importantly, it's an amazing story that you tell. Now, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but I guess we really need to tell anyone who hasn't read the book China Blonde. Tell us about your journey, how you ended up in China and the discoveries you made while you were there.
Wow, how long have you got? It's just, okay, I guess the first thing is that I married in a man who is in hotels, who I met on a blind date. And as they say, the rest is history. And at the time I was a career girl, television newsreader, I'd thought about moving overseas, but I had thought by then that time for me had come and gone. So we kind of just missed it until a job came up in Hong Kong, and I don't know, a light bulb went off and we both were on the same page and we thought, let's just do this, So we went to Hong Kong, quit my job after 10 years. I also found out that week that we were pregnant. So a bit of a double whammy, I always say. New foreign country, having a baby. There was a lot. But we had the most amazing 4 years in Hong Kong. It was just the time of our lives. It's a beautiful country. And, it's had its fair share of problems, obviously, since. But we spent 4 years there. Ava sort of grew up there. And then we had to make the move to China, which was the mainland. And we had kind of been maneuvering around that and putting lots of feelers out to move to other countries, like, Bangkok in Thailand or Seoul in Korea. There are all sorts of jobs that came up, but that for some reason or another didn't work out. And China at the time, well, they still are, were just building. I think 80 hotels in 1 year under the umbrella of Starwood that James worked for. So there was just no avoiding China. So eventually this town called Xi'an came up, and it looked, all you got to go by is Google, and it looked livable. It looked quite, pretty and quintessentially Chinese. So we said yes, and James went up to get his first role as general manager of the Western there. And that was 2.5 years. And, it seemed like a very long 2.5 years. It was culture shock huge culture shock because it was so different to Hong Kong. Even though I'd been to China in the past and I'd been to Shanghai, it was another step removed from Shanghai because, it was kind of like going back into the 70s. Nobody really spoke English, or if they did, it wasn't, it was just very basic conversation. Many of them had never seen a Westerner. So if you walked outside the hotel, we were fair game, and it was just on, especially with Ava, who was at that point, she was 3.5 or 4 with long blonde hair. They would just gravitate towards her. So there was a big, steep learning curve living in China, but it turned out to be an amazing experience and one of the best things that we ever did, and we came away with such a huge amount of respect and knowledge for China as it is, and so amazing lifelong friends.
Yeah, that's incredible. And tell us about, so you're pregnant and overseas and you're navigating doctors, etc. What was it like though when you got to China and navigating anything to do with, doctors or the medical system?
It was scary. I guess the language barrier is one thing. And I think I tell a story in the book when Ava, we were staying in the hotel for a while. Then we had an apartment sort of attached to the hotel. And there was those hobs, and it was just a 1 ring hob because they just use a wok. They don't really use anything else. And of course, Ava put her hands on it. It was bright red, and we turned it off, but it was still hot, and she just put her palm flat down and we could hear it sizzle. And I was like, oh my God, and it's, what do we do? How do we ring a doctor? We don't even know how to call one, what to say. And thankfully we were cushioned by the hotel bubble. So we could call the manager on duty, who then brought these doctors over. And it was like something out of Star Trek. They arrived with their white coats on, carrying their silver briefcases, marching into our house. And there was a lot of Chinese going on, and Ava's sobbing and didn't know what was happening. And I'm like, could she have some Panadol? Can't, booyah, don't do that. And they ended up just putting a bit of cream on it. But it was a pretty traumatic experience just for the fact that you actually don't know what's happening. In hindsight, it's quite funny, and but at the time it's just like, where are we? And we had a couple of trips to the local hospital, and that was just a comedy of errors too, because the local doctor there was so enamored with foreigners that all he wanted to do was practice his English. So he would walk us all the way out to the car, practically getting in the car with us, waving us off like we were long lost best friends. And it was just funny. But, they were such an embracing culture as well. They get a lot of a bad rap, Chinese, but they are, a very welcoming culture. I'd have to say that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what do you think you learnt the most, I guess, about yourself in living abroad and traveling, but also to a non-English speaking country and immersing?
I think from Hong Kong and China, I just think that as humans, we are so adaptable. And if we let ourselves be, we really can do anything. And, nothing's forever. And if you go in with that mindset, I think, if it's that bad, you can always leave. You're not stuck, unless it's COVID and you are stuck. But it's just, I think, we can adapt to these situations, and we do. And it doesn't matter where you are and what's thrown at you. Humans are a pretty resilient bunch. So I think we can, get around it as we did. And if you've got your family there and you're on the same page, if you can laugh at it as opposed to, there are times I did cry, but if you can see the funny side of it, then I think that helps as well.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think, and there's a lot of humor in this book, which is what I loved as well. Like, I can see your humor all the way through it. It's brilliant. How long did it take you to write the book? Like, how did the book come about, or the process of it all?
I think I always thought, like most good journalists, that I had a book in me. I just really didn't know what it would be about. And then as soon as we stepped foot on Chinese soil, it was clearly so different and so fascinating, and there was so much to tell that I knew it had to be about China. And I didn't know in what format. I didn't even really know what a memoir was at that point. I didn't plan on putting myself in the journey. I just started doing a whole lot of interviews while I was in China. It took me about 18 months to settle there. Once I settled, I had met quite a lot of different people, locals, expats. So I decided to interview as many as I could and put my journalism skills to the test with a translator a lot of times, and just learn about who China is, how it came about, what the people living there feel, how they feel about the government and all these sorts of things. And then I just wrote that into big blocks of chunks of writing like I would write a blog post. Still no clue how to write a book until we got back to Australia. And then I started doing a lot of writing courses, and a penny dropped. I was like, okay, this is kind of what it has to be. I did a 6-week memoir course with Patty Miller, and she said, you've got to put yourself in the story. And I'm like, oh, okay, right. How does that work? And then I met an amazing coach, Bernadette Foley, who I still have a writing workshop with her to this day. And that just helped bring everything together. And it was a long process. Anyone that's written a book will know it's certainly not quick unless you're one of those people that is churning out a book a year, and it can be done. But I think in the beginning, it's several years in the making.
Yeah, wow. I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah.
I was just chatting this week actually with Jenny Valentish, who's an extraordinary author, but she's also, she teaches memoir writing. And I think, as she said, it's one of those things where you learn a lot about yourself by putting yourself into a story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because you really have to dig deep, and it's quite hard to do that. And you have to put yourself back in that moment, and when it's a couple of years later, trying to imagine how you felt in that exact moment, when you first arrived or you first stepped outside. It's hard, and to imagine those feelings and then to convey those feelings on the page so that other people also can feel that with you. I think that was a huge learning curve. I was lucky that I had so many photographs that I just would just look at them over and over and over and try to put myself back into that time frame and, remember what it was like. It's hard. And I've heard a lot of authors since say, they've had to really dig deep and haven't always enjoyed that, because it's a bit like therapy, isn't it? You've got to really look at who you are and why you do things.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And I suppose to be able to show light and shade as well, like as you said, the humor, but also the moments when it was really scary, and the moments when, you're out of your comfort zone. I think anybody who goes overseas, you're suddenly out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And to put yourself into a situation or a country where, as you say, you're up against other barriers as well, language barriers. And does it make you think about, new migrant people when they're coming here? And
it does.
What they
absolutely.
face?
Absolutely. Because you can flip that around and totally see how they must feel coming into our culture, because I don't think it matters where you go, even if you move to another state or you move across town, you're out of your comfort zone. And for human beings, that can be hard. We like to be surrounded by what we know. And I think that's why some people just stay put for 20, 30 years, because it's hard to do that. It's why put yourself through that, sometimes you ask yourself, because it's stressful. So I take my hat off to migrants coming here that don't speak the language and have to assimilate. And, it's just scary, very scary.
Yeah. And so did you take language courses like over in China, obviously, to learn how to speak the language?
We had a great tutor who Obviously, Ava was learning at school because she went to school from 4, and that was like 9 to 3, like a full-on school day. And James and I were learning. I would learn probably 2 lessons a week, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours a week. And I think by the end of it, I am proud to say that I could have quite a decent conversation with somebody. But it took a long, long time, and I've probably forgotten it all now. But that was such a proud moment, you know, when you walk into the coffee shop and you can order what you want and they understand you, because that's the biggest thing with Chinese is you might be saying the right words, but the tones are so different. There's 4 tones for one word. So if you get that wrong, you're saying something completely different, and who knows what you're saying. So I think when you actually, you know, I had a hairdresser that I went to, which I write about in the book, and it was quite funny because he spoke a tiny bit of English, I spoke a tiny bit of Chinese, but together we sort of, you know, mashed our way through a conversation. And by the end of it, you know, they would just make me speak Chinese. And so it was really good for me to learn it. But yeah, it's like, it seems like another world.
It would. And I suppose at least the good part about going to a hairdresser is you can show pictures.
Exactly. I remember showing pictures of Pinterest, and at that time they didn't have Pinterest, and he's like, what is this? You know, or they didn't know what it was. And then he got out a picture to show me the Westerner's hair that he had colored, and it was bright red, like redder than yours, like fiery, bright red.
Fire engine red.
And I'm like, okay, what about any blondes, you know? So that was always, yeah, it's always tricky getting a good hairdresser in these countries.
It really is. So, hey, let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about how you got into journalism, like what made you want to be a journo, and tell us about your career before the big move.
Wow, okay. Well, I think I see all these people graduating yesterday, you know, from the last year of school. And I remember that. And it's so hard to know what you want to do, isn't it? I really feel for kids. How do we know at that age what our lifelong career is? And I remember going to a counselor's office, school guidance officer, and she, you know, said, what do you want to do? And I was like, I really just want to go to Hollywood. She's like, oh, great. Well, can you act? No. Can you sing? No. Can you dance? No. Okay. Well, we might have to just look at something else. Anyway, we came up with journalism, which I had always admired the newsreaders as a young girl on television. And I thought, you know, I wanted to be a librarian when I was younger. So that kind of fitted in with the theme. So before you know it, I'm enrolling in journalism courses at university. And I'm the sort of person, I think, that once I'd make a decision, that's it. It's happening, whether I want it to or not. So I spent the next probably 5 years adamant that I was going to become a newsreader one day and trying to get there. There were a lot of struggles, you know, trying to get my first journalism job was not a walk in the park. There were blondes that wanted to be reporters were a dime a dozen. So standing out was tough. I had a very young sounding voice. I looked much younger than I was. Eventually, NBN Television in Newcastle, the news director rang me and said, you are the perfect example of persistence pays off. I've got a job for you in Tamworth as a journalist. Do you want it? I was like, hell yes. So off I went and went to Tamworth and did a couple of years there. And that was such a great grounding, you know, because you're doing all sorts of stories from, you know, out on the farm to the biggest tomato competition to double murder-suicides, and you get the whole gamut of things. And so that was sort of where it started.
Wow. And did you fall in love with country music? Because, of course, Tamworth is synonymous with that.
I loved it. I mean, it's such a great city. And, you know, it's just, yeah, everyone knows everyone, which, you know, it was just fun for a few years. It was really good fun. And the people there are so warm. And, you know, we'd do the country music festival and it came alive and, you know, interviewed lots of country music singers. So it was good fun. Yeah.
Oh, how fantastic. And I think you've clearly always had an adventurous spirit, though, because I love we've got a job for you there. Do you want to move? Sure.
I know. And I was living with a boyfriend at the time, and I didn't even tell him. I didn't tell him I'd said yes to the job. I said I was thinking about it, but I'd already taken it. And I was just, I think looking back, you know, I've sort of analysed myself a bit, and I think I'm one of those people that always wanted to live a life less ordinary. in whatever way that looked. So, yeah, that sort of must be in my DNA.
Which is incredible, really, and I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think I'm sort of smiling on the inside here because I remember getting to the pointy end of high school, and this amazing English teacher, Carol Jones, who's also an author, by the way, said to me, "Well, what is it you really want to do, Sandy?" And I said, "Well, I just want to be an actress. I want to be an actress." And when that fails, I want to be a writer, right? So same.
Yeah.
And I went off to uni and started journalism and was doing, acting as well at uni. Crazy combination. Wow. I don't know what I was thinking with that. And for me, I ended up doing this summer kind of program, like a summer internship at a very large newspaper here in Melbourne. And it all sounds really amazing, except that, I got groped several times. I got smacked on the ass. I was told to make coffee. Oh. And I think, I'm 53. So when you think about it, that was my intro to journalism. Yeah. And I thought, to hell with this. Anyway, I quit.
Oh, gosh.
I quit journalism at uni.
Were very different too, I think, back then.
So different.
And newsrooms were a bit like that too,
Yeah, so different. But, it's, so different and yet same, right? It's really fascinating the more people I talk to.
Yeah.
Right? And but it was kind of just for me, I just went, you know what? I was raised by this very left-wing feminist mother, and I was like, wow. I'm not dealing with that and I'm not taking it. And I remember telling this very experienced journalist off who said to me, basically, you've got no career in this business. And I thought, yeah, he's probably right. I'm just too opinionated. I can't suck it up.
Yeah, look, if I had $1 for everyone that told me, oh, you'll never be a newsreader, or oh, you're not cut out for it, or, you look like this or you look like that, you don't look right. And, people like to have their 2 cents worth. But I was like, no.
Don't they? But the beautiful part about it is that you were meant to be a journalist, right? So you persevered and you became one.
I don't know if it's weird because I became a journalist and then a newsreader, and I'm actually an introvert. I say introverted extrovert, but I was the shyest kid in primary school, so I'm not quite sure how that married up, but I think it's that sense of adventure in me coupled with being extremely shy somehow. I mean, because it wasn't my natural element to be a newsreader, put it that way. It was quite difficult in those early days to do it. I really struggled. But the perfectionist in me made sure that I, did it and did it well. But yeah, it's interesting the choices you make when you look back.
It really is. But I think that that's a really interesting point that you make, that people often confuse introversion with shyness, and yet they can be two very different things.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
they are, aren't they, really? Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of introverts, interestingly enough, go on to be actors, newsreaders.
Well, you see that, don't you? You'll see a lot of them come out and say that. And I think it's just a way of them putting some sort of mask on and going out and being someone that they're not,
Absolutely. I love it. So, obviously the Good Girl Confessional is part of the Women Beyond 40 platform. Yes. And so I'm always really fascinated about this. We had the lovely Tracy Spicer came on the podcast. She's just divine. And she's beautiful. And just talking about, for her, having to stand up against ageism in an industry that sees youth as everything. And it's quite funny that, not funny, haha. It's funny that, when you started out, they were like, you sound too young, you look too young, you're all these things.
Or I look too much like a doll, somebody told me at the time.
Wow.
To be reading serious news stories.
Wow.
All sorts of things. And Tracy and I actually read the news alongside each other at Sky when they were trying out 2 females reading the news. So she'd come into Sky to do a few stints then. So, yeah, and she's been amazing, such an advocate and standing up and really saying, you know what, it's not about what we look like. It's about what's, going on inside. So, yeah, hats off to her.
Yeah, she's quite extraordinary. But as she, points out as well, that she kind of made it in the industry because she did look a certain way, and that there were lots of women, sadly, who got overlooked because they didn't look like that. I know.
I mean, we had a lunch the other week. You might have seen it on social media with all of my Sky News girlfriends, and we're all blonde. We practically all look the same, It's quite hilarious when you look back at it. It's not funny, but that's how it was,
Yeah, 100%. And I still think there's an element of that as well. What they perceive to be the quintessential Australian newsreader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it's no surprise, really. I mean, when you think about it, you only have to, as you found out, you only have to go overseas to realise what internationals think Australians must look like.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they have a very set stereotype of what Australia is, Yeah. I remember being overseas, when I was much younger, and someone saying to me, "Oh, you're so white." And I was like, well, yeah, I think they think that every white Australian is meant to be sun-bronzed and, right? Living on the beach, with the kangaroos and just it's all relaxed and down under, just cruising around, living the dream.
And then you see all these cheesy movies and you think, yeah, no wonder they think that, right? Yeah. Or Neighbours.
I know. That's why James wanted to come down under from England after watching Home and Away. He's like, I want to get down there and that surf,
That's funny because I've had a couple of guests on the podcast who've actually said that. Oh, no, I just thought Home and Away and I couldn't wait to get to Australia. And I'm like, really? And then got here and went, oh, hang on a minute. This is not what it looks like. All of Australia is not Summer Bay.
When you interview Sophie Green, the author, you've got to ask her about Home and Away. She's got some great stories.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
I won't tell you anymore.
So tell me about moving from journalism and news reading in particular. So moving away from that, and obviously you moved away from that because, James, your husband, had an opportunity to go overseas. Do you miss it? Did you ever miss it?
I think I missed the camaraderie in the beginning when I first moved to made that leap to Hong Kong. And I think it was more just a case of lost identity because I had become a mum, which I think happens anyway when you become a mum. I was in another country. I didn't have a job, so to speak. So it was a case of, who am I now without, the auto cue in front of me and the bright lights? What am I going to do? What's my purpose? So it took quite a while to kind of realize what I could do, what else was out there for me, because I didn't really want to go back into news reading. I just had a baby. I wanted something more flexible. I was tired after 20 years, I wanted to try something else. Through word of mouth, I got asked to do some MC work, which was amazing. I mean, I don't love MCing, but I ended up MCing with a Filipino family organization that I did it for 10 years until COVID, which was great. This one event every year. As I said earlier, I started writing my expat entertainment blog, Mint Mocha Musings. So that was an outlet, and that sort of got me into creative writing, which was a lot different to just writing a journalist, a 2-minute news script, which is very, straight to the point sort of thing, simple. So that sort of challenged me to write creatively, and then writing for magazines and things like that. So, yeah, it was good. And then by the time we went to China, I had sort of found my groove a bit more, and I could, wherever I was, took my laptop and did that.
Yeah, which is brilliant. And I think, the world has since discovered, obviously, thanks to COVID, that we can actually work from anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, it's made everything so much easier, hasn't it, in that way?
It has. It's like, have Wi-Fi, will travel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and proving, and the flexibility this is giving parents of children, which we never had prior to COVID.
No, I know. I look back at, even my mum's era, and, she had to give up her full-time job. She was a single parent because they wouldn't allow her to work part-time. This is back in the 70s. So, we've come such a long way that, mums with new babies can work in between if they're on the laptop, which is great.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I think even, as far, even for me, I mean, my children are grown-ups now, but even my generation was really stuck with that, the rolling of the eyes if you had to leave the office because the school's called and your child's broken their arm or something. Like, how dare you?
And I think that still happens, sadly, as well. You get frowned upon if you need to. Men don't, but women do. But that's a whole other issue, isn't it? There are about that.
No, it is a whole other issue, and one that gets brought up here a lot, actually, because it is really about, the rights of women in the workplace. And it does come up a lot. But I know that, as you said, not being able to be a newsreader because it's a full-on gig and there's not a lot of flexibility. There's no, well, let's do job share.
No, I mean, I would have had to in Hong Kong, if I had been given a job, would have probably had to be up at the crack of dawn, 4 a.m. or something, doing shift work, which is, you don't know when you're going to get called in. And I just struggle with living like that, So, I mean, in hindsight, sometimes I wish I had tried to do it, but I just don't think it was for me at the time. It just wasn't right. So I'm glad that it did go the way that it did. And a lot of people, as soon as we came back to Sydney after 6.5 years away, oh, are you going back to Sky News? No, I've done that. That time in my life has passed and, I've moved on to other things now, as much as it was an amazing time. And I met, my best friends for life as well. And I'm still doing a bit of presenting, ironically, on different things. You've probably seen me on the Doors Plus commercial. From an integrated to Doors Plus, hey. But it's fun and it's easy, that sort of thing.
But I think that's fabulous. And I think this is one of the reasons why I adore you so much is that, we talk a lot in this podcast, but I do think it's really important for women to know you can change your job, you can change career paths, you can change the way you take your career.
I think so.
And you can be diverse and have multiple, like people will say to me, oh my God, you've done so many different things over the years. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm a consistent quester in life. I'm fascinated by things. I'm interested in things and I get bored if it's the status quo for too long.
And I think people get stuck and then they forget, especially women our age, forget of all those years of experience that they've had and what that entails and what else you can do with that, especially today. I was like that in Hong Kong and that was 10 years ago, but I remember a friend said to me, you're not just a newsreader. You've been a producer, you've written shows, documentaries, you've been a people manager, you've orchestrated programs and interviews. So many different things have come along with that can be utilized outside of that box, literally. And I think I still speak to women all the time that are scared to move on, but, scared to let go. But really, they just have to have that self-belief and tap into all of that experience they've had in the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing. And something that we're really big on over at WB40 is having articles in the magazine or on the website about exactly that, changing careers. It doesn't necessarily need to be a scary thing. And a lot of women, especially when they hit their 40s, find themselves, at a crossroads. A lot of people, get made redundant or they're sort of at the peak of their career, but going, I can't go any further where I am. I don't know what to do now. And so I think it's really important, that people keep having this discussion, that you can not necessarily reinvent yourself, but you can take all of the skills and the knowledge that you've learned over all the years from other things that you've done and hone it into something that you really want to do.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for women to really lift each other up as well and just help each other realize, our full potential. There's so much we can do. It's not over when you hit 50 or 40, the world is our oyster, but it is just stepping out of that comfort zone, which can be, rightly so. It's scary, but then if you don't take that leap, you never know. And if you do, what's the worst that can happen? It can fall apart, but, you get back up and keep going.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful message because it's so true. And as you say, it's not just, I'm blessed to talk to women as you are, who are in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, and way beyond that. And so, through you, I met the beautiful, Jan Latta, for example, who is in her 80s and a wildlife photographer and doing extraordinary things.
It's amazing.
Right?
And
amazing.
Not anytime soon.
No. Well, she was having a chat with me saying she'd like to go back to Africa. So I think, it's just a beautiful example of how we pigeonhole ourselves, though, at a certain age and say, well, okay, we're meant to be this at this age or meant to be that at this age. But what we're seeing right now in the media is this beautiful resurgence of women, older women, saying, I'm taking my place, I've got something to say, I'm getting it out there, and beautiful people like, Jamie Lee Curtis, for example.
Yes.
Really stepping forward. Or, Helen Mirren, whom I love.
Yeah.
This is who Emma Thompson, this is who we bloody are.
Yeah. And it's okay. And look at us. We're amazing. I love it. I went to a big luncheon a couple of days ago with Tori Archbold, who's amazing. And it was just 70 women, who were just so on fire and engaged, but authentic and, uplifting and supportive of each other. And it was just, really inspiring. It makes you think, right, we're not done just because we, hit middle age or whatever. There's plenty more in the tank.
Yeah, 100% true. And I think that's the most positive kind of messaging we can, give to other women.
I think also allow yourself to have those times where you're not so sure, or have those times where you don't want to be all guns blazing. You don't have to fit a certain mold. You can take a step back. I said to you earlier, I've got an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, which can slow me down. I have to manage my health or I burn out quickly. But it's okay to give in on those days when you can't just be firing on all cylinders. I think sometimes think you have to do it all, and you've got to be able to, have the children get them to all their activities, make the dinner every night, have the house clean, and be this gung-ho career woman and a great wife or whatever. But you can't be all of those things at once, and it's okay.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And like you, I have an autoimmune disease. These are hidden disabilities at times. I have ulcerative colitis. And I think that, it's things that, as you say, I think the most extraordinary thing I find about women is the resilience to kind of go, I'm not doing okay.
Yes.
But I've still got to get some stuff done. And whether that's, I got dinner on the table for my child tonight, or I got out of bed today, or, right?
Exactly. It's okay if you have a time in your life where you are, maybe you are suffering from mental health, or maybe, have times, we all have times in our lives where things aren't rosy. We're not all out there just going, yes, career woman, I'm so great, I can do this. It's a bumpy road, but I think it's to also recognize that and allow those downtimes, and speak up about it. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's next for you, Nicole? Because you've got more adventures on the horizon. You are unbelievable.
Oh, my God. Now that I've just told you all about that whole moving to Hong Kong and China and how hard it was, we, as you said, like a bit of adventure and are putting ourselves through that again. And at the moment, I sometimes think, what were we thinking? Why are we doing this? But I know we will look back and think it was amazing. We're moving to Singapore. My husband, James, has already moved there 8 weeks ago. I'm here with Ava until she finishes primary school, her last year. So we'll go in at Christmas. It's a whole new adventure and a new chapter, which we are looking forward to. I think we knew that there would be a time when we would go again. We just didn't know how that would be, how that would look. It's come at a great time because Ava's, starting high school next year. So that works well. I can, as you say, my skills I can have laptop, we'll travel. I can continue being an author publicist and doing all of that from Singapore. James will be working as a GM at the Western, and he won't be traveling as much, so life might be a little bit easier. So, we've got another adventure coming. And at the moment, I'm in the middle of, oh, my God, why is this happening? But, once we get there, it'll probably be another great thing that we've done and, look back on and feel like we really lived life.
Wow. Well, I imagine that first of all, how bloody exciting, super exciting.
Hope so.
I had my niece, actually, Amy, lived in Singapore for a while, absolutely loved it, and actually met her now wife there.
Oh,
and
wow.
which is lovely. And my sister-in-law, Marianne, actually lived over there with her husband as well for some time. They've moved back to Australia now. I think, I love your adventurous spirit, and I'm imagining, you're probably tearing your hair out right now going, everything has to get packed.
It's gone. Everything has gone. Because of the flooding
Wow.
situation. Our house is packed up, so it has been shipped. So that's a relief. So now we're just in the countdown, 5 weeks to go, and it's just all of those, farewells and tying up loose ends and Ava's last year of school and primary school. But it's been a year.
It's a lot. And how beautiful that you'll be here, for all the celebrations for the end of primary school, because that's exciting.
Yeah, we couldn't miss it. We had to do that,
No, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
And so if anybody, here's a big question because you're a publicist and I love that you are. If anybody is listening, and I'm sure we do have a number of our listeners, we know this because we get questions all the time, who want to write their memoir or who are thinking about writing a book, how do they get hold of you or a publicist once the book's written and it's published?
They can look me up online at my website, NicoleWebbOnline.com. I'm just in the middle of redoing that, but that will have all the information, and if you want advice or anything, I'm happy to hand it out.
Beautiful. And of course, we will put up all of your links, Nicole, in our show notes as well and all over socials. You're incredible. You're absolutely amazing. I don't know how you were doing all of this at once.
Well, you know what? I'm having a nap in the day. I said you have to just give in. And I'm first to say I'm not just doing it all. I do have to crash and have a little lie down just to get through it. But you know what? That's okay.
Oh, I'm pleased to hear that you are having a nap because your life is pretty frantic at the moment. You're doing all the things I'm doing and moving on top of it. And I'm like,
I know. Well, I'm so glad we got to do this because I've heard all of your podcasts and you're so fun to talk to. So, yay, we did it.
We did it. Yay. And look, congratulations on your extraordinary career, on your beautiful book. We'll put up a link for the book as well. It's so lovely. And everyone can read more about your extraordinary journey. And I can't wait to hear about more adventures when you're in Singapore.
Take the blog out of its hiatus and bring it back. What interesting stories I can find.
I know, and I'm sure there will be interesting stories. It's really exciting. So, thank you so much for your time. You're absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.